And Trump's election campaign was an example of that, because the trend of postmodernism is this ironic cynicism to everything. It's exemplified by something like The Simpsons, and it reached its peak in the 90s. And you'll find some interesting stuff from the writer David Foster Wallace from the 90s, where he predicted that this would come to an end, that people now then when he was speaking, were being raised on The Simpsons, and they were being raised on this constant diet of irony and cynicism. And as you get older, you tend to rebel against what you grew up with and question established norms. And one time, the outlet for that was irony, and was this pervasive cynicism and nihilism. But when you grow up in the generation after Gen X, and the establishment has been forever pushing this cynical worldview, then the transgressive thing is actually to be sincere. Now, they can deconstruct the sincerity of someone like a Christian conservative in the United States, because this is kind of a pre-ironic sincerity. On some level, they just don't get it. But Trump had this post-ironic sincerity, where he did believe the things he was saying, and he really did want to build a wall and kick out illegals, or at least we thought at the time. But he also had the necessary cover of irony that makes this kind of speech acceptable, and gives it this feel of being even more transgressive than the very postmodern bent of irony.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's well said that. And you think, yeah, it's as if irony. There was an old pop band called Pop Will Eat Itself, which it did. But I think it's safe to say that irony will eat itself as well, especially like you were saying with The Simpsons. And in a way, The Simpsons, I remember there was some great articles up at Countercurrents on South Park after the Trump election, and they were like exactly what you were saying just there, actually, where South Park has always been subversive against the mainstream narrative. But the problem that they had was that how do they tackle somebody like Trump and the Trump alt-right kind of thing that was going on a couple of years ago, when that is itself subversive? It would have to be where South Park would have to actually get on board with that. And what they tried to do was to use that same kind of 90s Gen X irony against Trump, and it killed the ratings of South Park because, well, they end up just being boring because they're not as they're like a layer of irony behind, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and this actually makes me think of something we were saying earlier, which is that we were talking about this kind of false opposition, and how the people criticizing this are operating under this kind of unquestioned relativism that doesn't actually make any sense, because they can't defend any of their positions. And it's like, in postmodernism, the postmodernism is it's like centrally defined as like, it was this rejection of the meta narrative. There's nothing greater than the individual. And so it brings in this trend of cynicism against any kind of meta-narrative, any kind of collectivism, things like religion, nationalism. And when this is pervasive so long, really, if you deconstruct this further through the use of irony, you come to the realization that, well, in this nihilistic, relativistic worldview, I can just as easily build a wall and kick out illegals, and we can all LARP as National Socialists, as I can LARP as an anarchist that wants all this bullshit. It's just as arbitrary. So, let's have a bit of fun and go with the fun one.
Yeah, and there was that. I think she's, is it Alicia Cortez or something that they've
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, yeah.
Yeah, and she had some pictures of herself, like sort of alongside a chicken wire fence last week.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
And you can see that. So in this case, that is like them, the sort of global homo machine, trying to be earnest and trying to be heartfelt, and then it just gets turned into this ridiculous meme. And it's like, well, you can't be serious, even if like the other side of that fence was full of dead people. People would still find it funny to take the piss out of it, and you see like the chickens coming home to roost.
Yeah.